Oh, okay. That was my zombie noise. Which is perfect for Resident Evil 7.
Nice intro.
That's a great intro right there.
How'd you like Resident Evil 7?
I don't know. It was, I think Resident Evil 7 was just okay.
Now let's start off by asking, what is your favorite Resident Evil game of all time?
My favorite Resident Evil game of all time is probably Resident Evil 2, the DualShock edition for PlayStation. I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but I really like that one just because of, in terms of gameplay, there was so much of it. Because you would play through the entire game as whoever you picked, Leon or Claire.
Right.
And then once you completed the game as them, you would get the B story. Once you completed as them, then you could play through the game as
the other character.
So you start out the game as Leon, then you play through the game as Claire after you've beaten as Leon, so you see what Claire was doing the whole time. And then by doing that, you unlock the B story for Leon, which is you play through the whole game again as Leon, but it's different stuff is happening because it's like Claire has gone through first. And then you unlock the B story for the other character.
Right, so it's basically the same game, but 4 times with slight variations.
Yes, the same game, but 4 times with different variations on each one. Resident Evil DualShock Edition is probably my favorite one. In terms of, like, functional gameplay, I would have to say the remake of Resident Evil for GameCube.
That had the mechanics that you like the most?
I guess in terms of, like, gameplay mechanics, probably Resident Evil 4.
Really?
But I think Resident Evil, the remake for GameCube, looked really good, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot less campy than the original PlayStation Resident Evil.
Now, you say 4 was your favorite in terms of mechanics, but 5 had the exact same mechanics. In fact, slightly improved.
I think 5 is only entertaining if you have 2 people. If you're trying to play through 5 by yourself, it's just not fun.
I've never done that before. I've always played Resident Evil 5 with a friend.
Yeah.
So that's probably why Resident Evil 5 is my favorite game of all time.
Yeah. Resident Evil 5 is really good if you have someone to play it with. Because I've played it a lot both with someone, and I've played it a lot by myself. And it's just by yourself, it either is difficult to the point of agonizing, or it is insanely easy and not entertaining. So you said 5 was your favorite?
Right.
Why did you like 5 so much? What did you like about 5?
The thing I liked about 5 is that it was 4, but you could do it with a friend.
Yeah.
And that just made it really fun. Because I always went through it with a friend. And even, the main campaign was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was action, just like there was 4. Maybe not as much camp, unfortunately, but the mechanics were refined. And you could play through it with a friend, and that made things really, really fun.
So you like the campiness in the Resident Evil games.
I really enjoy it. I like the characters. I like the characters and the silly comments they make.
Yeah.
I think the best example of that would be in Resident Evil 5, where you're fighting this giant spider, and you could try shooting at it, but the best way to fight it is to shoot it until its mouth opens and then throw grenades in its mouth.
Now I remember that, yeah.
And every time you do that, your character yells a one-liner like, "Eat this," or "Choke on this." It was so amusing to watch her do that.
Now, see, the thing is, do you think they were being campy on purpose, or do you think because it's a Japanese game, they were kind of unaware of the campiness that they were doing?
I think they amped up some of that campiness you think about 4, it was just reveling in the campiness, so I'm sure they tried to...
4 was really reveling in the campiness.
Are you kidding? Like in the opening where you're fighting all the zombies in the beginning, he goes, "Where's everyone going? Bingo?"
Oh, yeah, that's just because, that's true, yeah. I liked Resident Evil 4, don't get me wrong, I liked it. I think my main complaint about Resident Evil as a series is the fact that Leon is for some reason infatuated with Ada Wong. And he clearly has had several better options, like the President's Daughter.
I don't know.
Helena from Resident Evil 6. Maybe she's not better. We're going to pretend Resident Evil 6 isn't a thing.
I don't know. How well do you remember Resident Evil 6?
Kind of well.
Have you ever beaten it?
Yeah, I beat the entire game with the exception of Ada Wong's story, because when I got to you don't unlock Ada Wong's story until like the end of the game.
Right.
So beating the entire story, and I got halfway through Ada Wong's campaign, and I was just like, I'm done with this. This is so stupid.
Yeah, the person that I played Resident Evil 5 with all the time, my girlfriend at the time, we just played that to death. And then Resident Evil 6 came out. We tried to play that, and there's 3 main campaigns, and we didn't make it through the first one. So
yeah.
She bailed after the first one, and then I had to finish the game by myself. And
Fun fact about Resident Evil 6, if you get in a vehicle in that game, it will crash. I'm sure someone's going to look this up and prove me wrong, but every single vehicle you get in the campaign of Resident Evil 6, you crash. You crash a vehicle at the start of Leon's campaign because, oh no, there's a zombie on the roof of the car. It's a T-virus zombie. You could literally just take a mild turn at a leisurely pace, and it would just slide off the roof of the car. But no, Leon's like, holy crap, and like turns the whole vehicle, and it rolls over, side over end. Ass over tea kettle all the way down the side of a highway in a tunnel, I think.
I'll have to take your word on that, because I barely remember that game at all. I do remember a helicopter crashing, and that's pretty much
helicopter crashes. As per Resident Evil, all helicopter pilots must die.
Yeah. Well, Barry survived pretty far so long.
Barry's not a helicopter pilot.
Isn't he?
No.
Then he did. Isn't he like the guy?
He's just one of the members of STARS.
No, I'm pretty sure he takes off in like Resident Evil 3. He's like the guy that pilots the helicopter so Jill can escape.
I think Barry might just know how to fly a helicopter. He's not a helicopter pilot, though.
No, knowing how to fly might make me more susceptible to death.
I don't know what someone at Capcom has against helicopter pilots, but people at Capcom do not like helicopters or helicopter pilots.
Nope, they die pretty easily.
They're actually surprised a helicopter in Resident Evil 7 didn't explode.
Was there a helicopter in Resident Evil
7? Yeah, at the end of the game. I'm kind of surprised it didn't just blow up.
The very last second.
Yeah, the very last second. It's, we opened a new door, and now we're going to live life to go, boom! It just explodes.
Well, we didn't see it land. It did take off over the horizon, so maybe it did later.
Maybe it exploded on landing. They went to touchdown, and one of the wheels popped, and the whole helicopter just exploded. On a random topic, when I was in the military, one of the people I worked with was like really nervous about getting on helicopters, and I was like, why? And he's like, I don't want to get in anything that can have a mid-air collision with itself. Which I thought was just hilarious at the time. So yeah, Resident Evil 7. Now we've talked for 10 minutes about other Resident Evils.
If you're not familiar with the Resident Evil series, although I don't know why you wouldn't be if you're listening to this, but
yeah.
It started off as a survival horror game, which is from Resident Evil 1 all the way to Resident Evil 3 and then Code Veronica.
In Resident Evil 1, you play as a forklift disguised as a human being.
That was the first couple of Resident Evil games. But then after they made Resident Evil 4, it became the survival action, less about horror and conserving ammo, and more about killing everything in your way.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then now they did that for 4 and 5 and 6, and now Resident Evil 7 has come out. It's completely changed up the formula again.
Yeah, it's pretty much back to being survival horror, but it's not really that scary.
Well, you and I only have the experience of playing the game next to each other, so it's kind of hard for us to say. It's difficult to be scared.
But I think Bloodborne can be like way scary. So, okay, when I say a game is scary, I don't mean like, oh my god, I'm so scared. I don't mean like that. I mean like it's unsettling. I like games that are really unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
That don't I like Alien Isolation because that game's really unsettling. It's really tense. There are very few points in that game that are jump scares or that are designed specifically to like frighten people. The most of that game is designed more towards like making you very nervous or making you tense, which is I think better for the horror genre in general. Because you can only scare. I feel like you can only scare someone a certain amount of times before they're now used to that. They've adapted to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is no longer scary anymore. You have a guy jump out with a knife like 4 or 5 times, and like the first time, yeah, it's kind of scary because this dude you weren't expecting it. Guy jumps out with a knife. Oh no, he's got a knife. Okay, and then the player is going to like learn that, and they're going to learn how to adapt to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why like the first time the guy with the chainsaw shows up in Resident Evil 4, that is absolutely terrifying. Because that's nothing, that is not anything you've experienced up until this point.
Yeah.
But you grab the shotgun and you're like, okay, this is going to work way better on fighting these guys. And then this dude with the chainsaw comes up that's just shrugging off double-op buck to the face. And like, that's really scary. But then later on in the game, he keeps showing up and it's like, okay, well, I've dealt with this guy before and now my shotgun does even more power or has even more damage. So it's not scary.
Yeah, but then later in the game, regenerators show up and you can only get them with a rifle that you can only find later.
Yeah.
Thermal scope. So that's terrifying too.
That is like really scary, but it does, and they actually did something really good with those in that they only show up like a couple times and there's not like a lot of them.
Well, there are 10 regenerators technically. There are quite a few of them, but you only have to kill one of them. You can run away from the rest of them.
Right. So yeah, I think making people like tense or putting them on edge or unsettling them is a far more effective way of doing a horror game or a horror genre than just trying to make stuff like, ooh, really creepy, scary.
Well, Resident Evil 7 had a quite a wide variety. They had not only the immortal kind of, how would you describe Jack? He's like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of scary.
Yeah, he's kind of like Leatherface a
and
little
then
bit.
you've got
And that you can't really stop him.
right,
Yeah.
which I've fought enemies like that in other games that are terrifying. Enemies that you can't kill, like, just come back at you.
Yeah.
We got regenerators in Resident Evil 4, and I remember Dead Space 2 had a monster that was like that kept chasing you down, and Pyramid Head keeps coming back
yeah,
at
I
you.
can't remember what that monster's name was in Dead Space. Yeah, and Pyramid Head.
So enemies like that are pretty terrifying, but Jack just didn't seem to have that same punch. He was a great character. I think he's my favorite villain of that game.
I think he is. I like Jack in that game better than most of the other characters. I like Jack better than the player character. Can we just play through Resident Evil 7 as Jack?
That's something else I wanted to touch on, is the fact that Ethan is, without having like a third party point of view and having a personality for Ethan, they're obviously trying to make you play as Ethan, trying to make you become Ethan, so they made him as bland as possible.
Yeah, they kind of just made him a blank slate the player can put themselves into.
Which I guess might work, but it's sad that you lose those heroes that have all those personalities.
Ethan really, in terms of like the Resident Evil games, Ethan has no personality.
Yeah,
in terms of that, because like, you know, every other character has always had a personality. Chris had a personality even in the first Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those other protagonists, but Ethan is just pretty forgettable because he's supposed to be.
I think honestly, probably the most memorable character from any Resident Evil game is probably going to be Leon. He's going to be the one that most people recognize from Resident Evil. But that's just because I think, has Leon been in more games than any of the other characters?
I think they've rotated out. They've got a nice cast of characters that rotate out pretty well. They got Chris, they got Jill, they got Barry, they got Claire, they got Leon. They've got a lot of great characters, and they just kind of didn't use them for Resident Evil 7 because Resident Evil 7 was, I guess, just kind of disconjointed from the rest of the story in general.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about that? Resident Evil 7 going in a completely different direction, going back to its roots of being survival horror, even though it's first person.
I thought that was a really interesting idea. I'm not saying I'm disappointed in them for doing it, because kudos to them for like trying something.
Yeah.
Not just...
Well, they couldn't just make more Resident Evil 6 because no one would buy it.
Yeah, I mean, because Resident Evil 6 was so widely panned and like just disliked by long-term Resident Evil fans and people that had never played Resident Evil before.
If I remember correctly, it felt like they threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and none of it really stuck.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 6, like the first campaign was more about zombies and the second campaign was more about Ganados, that kind of thing, more action-oriented.
Well, there was so much stuff like crammed into that game because the whole first, and it's like, none of the campaigns were really that long either. They were maybe like 4 or 5 hours, maybe, like each one of them. And it was like the first one is this whole thing about, the president died and Leon is killing zombies and his new partner is, I think it's Helena. I can't remember what her name is. And her sister is like the host of all these zombies or whatever it was. And it's like, okay. And then suddenly now you're playing as Chris and Jill isn't there for some reason. And Chris is like a drunk now because one of his team members died. And I don't think it was...
Yeah, they completely changed Chris's backstory for 6, which just, it didn't feel right.
Yeah, it just didn't really make any sense, because then Jill wasn't in it, again.
Yep. It was just completely discombobulated.
We're talking more about Resident Evil 6 than we are about 7.
That's fine. Resident Evil 6 is part of the franchise.
It's true.
The only thing I remember about Resident Evil 6 is, aside from the part in the beginning where the president died, like the rest of the game was entirely forgettable to me. I knew that the one thing that stuck with me is one part where I was playing by myself as Sherry in the third campaign, where I was in a mental hospital or something like that. And that was the only part of the game that I actually remember, because that was the only part I actually felt an emotion. I felt tense and scared because I was just wearing a gown, a night hospital gown. So that was the only thing I can remember about that game.
They keep having this weird, goofy sexual tension between Sherry and Jake, which I thought was odd.
Don't remember it.
Oh, yeah, Jake, you play as Wesker's daughter. Wow. You play as Wesker's son.
Right.
Jake Wesker. And there's like this, they keep doing this like weird sexual tension between the two characters.
Nope.
That's never actually resolved.
Never stuck with me. Must not have been very memorable.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Resident Evil 7, though.
Everyone in this game is just sitting in a bucket of wallpaper paste. It's not horrible, but it's warm and weird and just bland.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I describe most of the characters in this game, is just like sitting in a bucket of wallpaper paste or eating oatmeal.
That's how I would describe the protagonists. The villains, though, were something pretty crazy. You got Jack, who's just he's a really enjoyable character.
He's a really fun enemy. And fighting him was kind of a pain in the ass, and I sounded like really pissed off, but like looking back on it, Jack is like one of the few things that I actually remember about this game.
Yeah, despite the fact that our boss fight against him almost turned us completely off the game because it was frustrating, his character design and his voice acting and the writing for that character was really good.
It was on spot. It was right on top of it, and I really like that. And then I always forget what his son's name is.
His son's name is Lucas.
Lucas was good. Did he actually die? What happened to Lucas?
As far as I can remember, he did not die. He survived, which, I don't know, maybe he'll show up in Resident Evil 8. Who knows? Maybe
he's in one of the DLCs or something.
That could be. And there was also the wife. I can't remember her name, but she was unique. A lot of body horror on that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of body horror in that. Which is, again, back on like the same thing with like horror. It's like, okay, yeah, that's really gross and like screwed up at first, but then it's after dealing with it for a couple minutes, you're just like, okay, I'm not really unsettled by this anymore.
I think we were more infuriated by the actual fight with her, which...
the fight with her was not that bad.
I don't know. The swarms, the fighting against... I've done other battles like that where you're fighting against swarms of enemies while you're trying to take on the main boss, and it's infuriating.
That is always really infuriating, and I'm not sure why game designers keep doing that. Is it just to make the fight go on longer? Is it to make it so that you have to worry more about conserving ammo?
I think it's just because they want you to worry about something. I don't know.
Okay, so going off onto another topic here. One of the bosses in Bloodborne is the Witch of Hemwick. And when you go to fight her, she can summon these like horrible shadow creatures that can do like just tons of, everything in Bloodborne does tons of damage. But she can summon these horrible shadow creatures. Generally, she doesn't summon more than 3. And they're there, but they're only there as a feint. Like, cause if you kill them, she'll just spawn another one. Mm-hmm. They're only there as a feint because she doesn't really have that much that she can do to defend herself. She has like a couple attacks. So the only reason the designers put them in there was to try and trick you from just straight attacking her. Cause you can just rush through her really fast by just attacking her specifically and not worrying about the other guys. So it's like that is an instance where I think they did it correct of having other enemies in there. But the thing is with with Travis's wife or the mom in Resident Evil 7, the other enemies aren't really a feint. They're just really annoying. Because it's not like she's really weak and you can just consistently damage her. If she was like a plant in the middle of the room, like if she turned into the horrible zombie thing and she was like stuck to the floor and is like spitting things at you, then I can understand there being like the molded trying to attack you because she's very weak. She can't do anything on her own. Mm-hmm. But she was mobile, able to move around. She was able to do stuff. So it's kind of like, why put other enemies in there? Are you just trying to make the fight go on longer? Are you trying to...
That was probably the worst out of the 3 characters. Least fun boss. Well, didn't really fight Lucas, but fighting the.
Didn't really fight Lucas directly, but I liked his stupid puzzle things. I thought that was kind of fun.
They were pretty amusing. Yeah,
that was an interesting addition to the game. Mm-hmm. So yeah, characters, weapons in the game, because that's kind of a big thing. All the other Resident Evils had like generally really memorable weapons.
Yeah, and this one just had a couple of them. I think he had 3 handguns, maybe 2 or 3 shotguns, and a Magnum.
Weren't really memorable, and we didn't get the Magnum till the end of the game anyway.
But then again, it's not really a game about the guns. This isn't.
No, but I mean, like my whole point is that every other Resident Evil has had like pretty memorable weapons in it.
Yeah, I remember how you started yelling. That's the Resident Evil gun from the first game.
Yeah, it was the star. It's the Samurai Edge.
Yeah.
Which is, cause like even in the first Resident, I don't know about the first one, cause I don't remember the first one as well. I only remember the remake. Mm-hmm. But even in that one, like almost every other Resident Evil, with the exception of, I want to say 4, 5, and 6. So all of the other Resident Evils, you could get, the Star's custom handgun, which is a Beretta 92 FS that has like a chrome barrel on it and then like a black slide and like wood grips. And it's called the Samurai Edge handgun. And it all kind of ties in because the gun shop that you go to at the start of Resident Evil 2 is the gun shop where they made all of the Star's handguns.
Oh, really?
It's the Kendo gun shop, I think is the name of it. That is, the guy that gets dragged out the window by zombies is the guy that actually designed all of the like Samurai Edge handguns, or like custom made them. So that's kind of like how all that tied back together. But yeah, the Samurai Edge handgun, which was called Albert 01, which I thought was kind of funny. And then that does tie, oh yeah, because the Samurai Edge is actually in Resident Evil 5, but you don't actually get it. Wesker is using it, which I thought was kind of funny and clever that Wesker is still using a handgun that he used back when he was in Stars. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, like every other Resident Evil's had memorable guns. Like the first one, the first one had like the Samurai Edge you could get. Then you could get like Barry's revolver, or you could get a different revolver if you let Barry live. The second one had like Leon could get like the Matilda, which is like a VP9 with a modular stock on the back of it that allows it to do burst fire. Claire could get like different submachine guns. I think Claire could get a grenade launcher.
I don't remember Resident Evil 2 as well as you do, probably.
Okay. That was pretty much the entirety of my like not early, but like late childhood was Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, I think you and I like the series for different reasons, because you played those early games and you really enjoyed them, and I played them and I thought they were okay. I just kind of, I had a frustrating time with them, and then when they came out with 4 and 5, I really got into the series then. That was what really dragged me in, because I really enjoyed the action, the survival action series.
Right. I mean, you've always kind of liked survival action games a little bit more. I've always liked games that are, well, it's hard to say this because there's not really that many that have come out that I can think of that have come out.
I can think of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and that's pretty much it.
I really liked Silent Hill. The earlier Resident Evils were a little bit more unsettling, but it was more of kind of like a panic of, I don't have enough ammo. I don't know what's going to be in this next area. Stuff like that.
Right.
So I've always liked like kind of more horror games, which is one of the reasons why I liked Alien Isolation so much. So yeah, the weapons in Resident Evil 7, I didn't really think were too terribly memorable. There weren't really that many scenes that like I can fondly look back on and think, oh, what a great time that was. I mean,
yeah,
because like even some of the minor boss fights, like the first time you see one of the Fat Molded, that wasn't really that memorable. We took him down pretty easily. We basically just had to keep dancing around some hail base and letting him spit vomit all over the place, and then we would just shoot him.
Yeah.
The chainsaw fight with
Mia?
No, the chainsaw fight in the basement.
That's probably the most memorable, but it was also the most frustrating.
That was probably the most memorable fight, also the most frustrating. Any of the little subrooms with I keep wanting to call him Travis. I know that's not his name.
No,
Jack Jr.
Yeah.
Any of the little puzzle things with him. Any of the interactions with him were actually really funny.
They were. Every time he had something to say, it was always really entertaining.
The part where he's trying to tell you what the code is to the door, and no matter what you put in, the thing's just going to come down and try and smash you. Those were entertaining. Any of the interactions with Mia were boring, and I didn't care. And as I showed you afterward, because you were wondering why I had picked Mia at the point in the game.
Because you had already learned that picking Mia enabled you to get the good ending, but taking Zoe enabled you to get the bad ending.
Gives you the bad ending. And also, like, there is literally no difference. You pick one of the two people, Mia or Zoe. You get on the little dinghy, and you take the dinghy out, and you see the big oil tanker that's on the side. And then the dinghy gets knocked over, and you end up on the oil tanker, and Mia finds Ethan on the beach. And then she has to go through the oil tanker, and then there's a whole like flashback sequence. That whole section does not matter which character you pick. You can pick Mia or Zoe, and either way, you are still going to end up playing as Mia, trying to find Ethan on the oil tanker. And then it was like, oh, there's only 2 endings you can get. You pick, and that's based on whether you pick Mia or Zoe. So the only reason I picked Mia was because I had looked up both of them, and I was like, wow, the ending if you pick Zoe is just completely like if I had just picked Zoe, when this game ended, you probably would have just been like, oh my god, fuck this. And then you probably wouldn't have even uploaded any more of them. You would have been like, no, we're done playing this. It was so dissatisfying.
We got you chose Mia, we got the good ending, and I was still unhappy. And if we had chosen Zoe, we got the bad ending, which is even worse.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever have I don't think I'd ever feel like playing this game again. Just not fun.
So as it sits now, would you want to play the DLC?
When
it comes out? Well, because as far as I can tell, the DLC is going to be free.
Well, there's already some DLC out that's not free. You can pay for some of that.
Well.
There is some unpaid DLC coming out later, which I'm sure we could try that out later. But as a general rule, I guess, for this kind of game, it's not really my genre anymore because they've gone back to being survival horror, which is not really the kind of game that I cared about. And it's too bad, in my opinion, because I really like the survival action. I like the campiness. I like the main characters like that. I liked every main character from Chris to Jill to Barry to everyone else. It was really enjoyable.
Lisa Trevor.
Okay, I don't remember who that is.
Lisa Trevor's in the remake of the first one. She's basically like a horrible zombie that ripped her mom and dad's faces off and she wears them on her back.
Oh yeah, I remember now.
You can't kill her.
Yeah. The first couple of games, even the remake, even though the remake is better in a lot of ways compared to the first game, it's still the genre I don't really care about.
Yeah.
So now that we've gone back to being a survival horror game, it's not a game I would pay full price for. Like,
right.
I wouldn't pay $60 for Resident Evil 7 again.
Right.
I probably won't pay full price for the DLC, or I'm not even really psyched up for Resident Evil 8 because it's just not my genre. It's a good game. It's a solid game, but it's like Madden at this point.
Have they announced Resident Evil 8?
But I'm just saying, when they inevitably do, unless it's a complete genre switch again, it's probably not something that I'm going to buy day one.
Right. That's understandable.
I do like having multiple endings. I do like having a moral decision. I thought the decision they presented was really cool, like how you already knew that having Mia was the good ending. But do you think you still would have chosen Mia if you hadn't known that information?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah?
I probably would have, even if I hadn't known that, because it's like, oh, she's the player character, or she's the main character's wife. So yeah, that's the entire reason he went there was to find his wife. Why wouldn't he pick her?
See, I like having that moral dilemma. You and I have different ways on looking at that. So I'd be interested in seeing the statistics on who would pick one and who would pick the other.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, knowing that one of them gets you the bad ending, like an ending that is worse in every conceivable way.
Well, I mean, technically, even the first Resident Evil had multiple endings because you could either let Barry live or let Lisa Trevor kill him.
Right.
You could rescue Chris or not rescue. If you didn't get certain things, you couldn't rescue Chris in the first one. So you could theoretically finish the end of the first Resident Evil, and just only as Jill and be only Jill on the helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could finish the ending of the first Resident Evil and be Jill and Barry and Chris, or like any combination of that.
Right. But you could make the decision to let Barry die, or you could make the decision not to rescue. I don't have any problems with having multiple endings or anything like that. It's just a bit disappointing that you've got this difficult moral decision, at least in my opinion. One of them, you could help Mia, who's your wife, and you're supposed to help. But on the other hand, here's Zoe, who's been helping you.
Yeah.
And is probably a better character at the moment. So it's a difficult moral decision, but there's, at the same time, there's also a correct answer, which doesn't, it just kind of makes the whole thing just seem not even interesting anymore.
No, I mean, you really like games, though, that give you different moral decisions.
That's true.
And then, like, in Mass Effect or in the Walking Dead games, none of the decisions you make are, I'm sure there are some of them, but for the most part, the majority of decisions you make aren't exactly wrong, but they're not right either. It's just a decision that you made.
Yeah, they're pretty equal decisions.
Whereas in Resident Evil 7, the only, like, decision that they give you, for the most part, is there is a clear wrong and right answer for, like, the end of the game.
Yeah. Clear by the end of the game, because that's when you find out if you've made the right or wrong decision, I guess.
So, I don't know. I kind of feel like, why even really put that in there then? If you're going to have one that's going to be the wrong or right decision, why even put that in there? Have whether or not Mia survives depend on, like, one of the fights with her or something.
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't really change much of anything, except you get an extra boss fight with Mia.
Yeah, if you choose to save Zoe, who, spoilers again, if you choose to save Zoe, who ends up dying 30 seconds later anyway, regardless of whether or not you saved her, which is complete BS.
Exactly.
If you choose to save Zoe, you have to fight Mia when she rescues Ethan from the horrible crab poop pod in the middle of the ship. You have to fight Zoe then, or Mia, and then she's all pissed off that you chose Zoe instead.
Depending on what choice you make, you have an extra boss fight or not, and then you've also got a different ending cutscene, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like a whole lot is changing depending on that. It seems like they tried to put that on there, kind of almost like they tacked it on to add replay value, but there really isn't any replay value to it.
There isn't, really. I mean, I guess you could say there's some replay value in, I want to get all the bobbleheads to get all these things, or, I want to get this, or, I want to get... Because I know there are other weapons that you can get. And then we missed a couple of them. I think there's like an over-under shotgun somewhere in the mansion that we just completely didn't get because you need the wooden shotgun to replace it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's literally what it is. We found that broken shotgun earlier. We put the broken shotgun on the statue and we took the fixed shotgun. I believe the broken shotgun is like an over-under or like a side-by-side or something that does way more damage. But you need the wooden shotgun to put on the statue to get the broken shotgun so you can use the weapon repair kit on it.
That's pretty cool.
So
there are a couple of kind of puzzles that we could have solved that we didn't, and so we could have accessed different weapons depending on how we played. That's pretty cool. I want to say that when we first started playing that game, we got our hand chopped off and you had to carry it around, and then later you had our legs chopped off and had to carry those around. I thought that was going to be a game mechanic that we played through later on in the game, like the worse you do, the more body parts you have to pick up. So depending on how poorly you do, you'd be walking around with maybe a hand, you'd be limping around a foot, maybe you've got a handful of body parts, an ear, maybe half a face. I thought that would be a pretty amusing. That was not the way they went with that.
No, I thought that you bring that up. That's really odd that they made it. He cuts your foot off with a shovel, and then you use the first aid med to heal yourself. Why couldn't it literally have just been like? Why did it have to be your foot got cut off? Because that led me to believe that later in the game, like other body parts were going to get cut off.
Exactly.
So that prescribed this like magical healing property to the first aid liquid. So I thought, yeah, like other body parts might get chopped off, and then you just use that stuff to heal it back together. But then it's like that's the only time that happens. So like why didn't he just like instead just like sunk a knife into your leg? So yeah, you've got a knife sticking out of your leg, and then you use the healing stuff on it. If you get stabbed with a giant frickin' piece of metal into your leg, they're going to take months and months of rehabilitation to heal. So like, why did it have to be your whole leg gets chopped off? That seemed kind of extreme and unnecessary.
I guess they were trying to go for the gross factor, but it really didn't play into anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see it being like, oh, it's the gross out factor, and that's literally the only reason.
So it's too bad. It was a mechanic that I was looking forward to that didn't actually get used.
And then again, that brings me back to the whole like thing of it. The whole thing of like horror games is, yeah, that was like really gross, and maybe it was a little scary the first time it happens, but then it's like, it becomes like a joke thing at that point. It's, oh, my leg got chopped off. Oh boy, I really wish I could get a leg up on this one.
Yeah, I suppose if they made it into a mechanic, it might not be so interesting.
No, I don't think it would be that interesting, and it's kind of like, it's not really scary. It's like the first time it happens, it's, oh man, that's nasty. Oh, I can't believe that happened. And then afterwards, you're just like, I mean, my leg got chopped off, whatever. It's not unsettling, so it's not really scary, which is, I don't think this game is a very good example of survival horror.
Oh, really?
I don't think it's maybe a good example of like survival, but it's not that scary. I never at any point felt like nervous or like tense about doing anything.
I'm trying to think back at how many points I actually felt like I was really tense. And maybe a couple times when I was being chased by the goop monsters, the molded. And no, even when I was playing, one of us is playing as Mia, being chased by the old lady, and that did not seem very tense at all. That
was a little bit more so. And only because you've taken power away from the gamer, that's a very effective way of doing like horror games. That's one of the reasons why I think Alien Isolation is so effective, is because you've taken an ability away from a player. In every other game, this thing might be chasing you, but you know that you can kill it. There is a way to kill it. But Alien Isolation, and also the parts where you're playing as Mia and the old lady is chasing you, there is no way to kill her. There's nothing you can do to get rid of her. You might be able to get her to go away for a while, but you cannot kill her. So I thought that was a little bit scarier than a lot of the other parts in the game. But again, I think that as a whole, Resident Evil 7 kind of fails as a horror game. It just wasn't that scary.
It's hard for me to disagree with you on that, because there were a couple of parts where I got jump scared, but there weren't a whole lot of parts where I felt really tense.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like that's partly our fault because we were playing it next to each other, and it's difficult to be scared when you've got a second player.
See, I don't know if that's really true though, because the first time I played through Alien Isolation, most of my roommates were actually watching me play through a lot of it. And even so, I still felt there were a lot of points in that game that were very tense, that were very nerve-wracking, that it was just like, I know this thing is here, I know it's going around looking for me, but I don't know what I can do about it. So there were a lot of points the first time I played through Alien Isolation that were still what I guess I would call scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't have to resort to jump scares or like gross out stuff. Because jump scares and like gross out are not really scary. They work once and then they don't really work that much anymore.
Well, I think the first couple of Resident Evil games used a lot of jump scares.
They did use a lot of jump scares. And I'm not saying that the first couple of Resident Evils really were that scary. They were classified as survival horror, but they weren't that scary.
So this Resident Evil 7 isn't too far from the original.
I guess, yeah, not too far.
And the parts that I liked in Resident Evil 7 are the parts that reminded me of Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
The games that were, the parts that were kind of campy and scary, like Jack, of course, taunting you. Jack Jr.
Groovy! That's not groovy.
Where he's just laughing and then he shoots himself in the head. It's just amusing.
That was pretty good.
I like the parts that aren't scary. I like the parts that are they're just hilarious in their own merit.
Yeah.
I like how Jack's taunting you and his son is always teasing you.
Arguing with himself, ripping out his fingernails, and he's, I'm trying to show him something!
But yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm sure Resident Evil 7 is going to be a big success compared to Resident Evil 6, and I'm sure that Resident Evil 8 will draw inspiration from Resident Evil 7, but now it's a genre game that I'm not really excited about.
Yeah. I think that Resident Evil 7 has already become more successful than Resident Evil 6 was.
Well, at least critically, because everyone likes it a lot. I mean, do you like it more than 6?
I think I like Resident Evil 7 more than 6, yeah.
Resident Evil 7 is a lot more memorable. Yeah, this game had a lot of good enemies, even though it didn't have good protagonists. And a lot of fun elements, and I'd play it again. I'm sure I'd enjoy playing a game like this. But I don't think I would be excited about it, and I don't think I'd pay for day one entry.
Right.
Would you still pay full price for Resident Evil games if they're like this from now on?
No.
I'd
I'd wait for them to go on sale.
Yeah.
I would just wait for them to go on sale on Steam or something and then buy them.
Because even though they added a little bit of replay value, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot to do.
Well, no, because I mean, like
you said, once you've been scared once, it's hard to kind of difficult to be scared again.
Look at games that are kind of similar to this in some way. Like if you look to like Dead Space as an example,
as a game similar to Resident Evil 7.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm just talking like a survival horror game that doesn't really have like multiple endings.
Okay.
Dead Space has way more replayability.
Why is that?
This does. I wanted to go back through and play Dead Space again because there were moments in it that I thought were really cool, that were really worth doing again. In Dead Space 2, I love the fights with the guy that kept regenerating. Those were all really cool. They were very tense. I liked all of the there's a part in Dead Space 2 we were locked inside like the Church of Scientology or whatever the hell, Unitology.
Yeah.
Thinly veiled Scientology. Yeah.
Right.
The Church of Scientology, and then there's those Velociraptor things that are chasing you around all the place. That was awesome. And I was like, there really isn't any replay value in this game. There's not multiple endings.
Not really, no.
You can like unlock stuff and you can play through the game with things that you had on the first playthrough. But there were a lot of points that I was like, that was really cool. I want to play through that again. So I would end up playing through, and I realized, I could just go back to a save that was on that point. But yeah, I would end up playing through the whole game again because there were a lot of really cool points in it. Resident Evil 7 didn't really have any of those really cool points that I wanted to see again.
Yeah, I can't think of any boss battle that would be really fun to go back to.
Maybe the chainsaw fight with Jack if you're really bored and you really want to hate yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a bit frustrating, but I guess once you know the mechanics,
it makes it easier. Yeah, but then when I would watch you play through that, the whole chainsaw fight with Jack in the basement felt very, very mechanical. It did not feel like a chainsaw fight in a basement. It felt like when I was watching you play it, when I was thinking in my head is move forward, press X, press X, press X, back up.
Exactly.
Back up, move forward, press X, press. That's what it felt like to me.
When you say chainsaw fight in the basement, you think running around maybe a big open area trying to dodge this chainsaw swinging around, not a small tight area where you're trying to dance around a stone column and kicking. Yeah.
I feel like that fight would have been way more interesting if it had been a bigger basement and he had been faster.
Yeah, and if you were chasing, well, he was already pretty fast considering that we can barely move.
Yeah, that's true. You keep the movement speed exactly the same, but just give you more room to work with and less things hanging from the ceiling.
And maybe places to hide from him.
Yeah, that would have been way cool. I would have really enjoyed that. But yeah, they kind of made it not as fun.
It was a one-on-one, just kind of go around, kick bags at him, try and stun him.
And that says a lot that is the most memorable part of Resident Evil 7 for us. Is a part that ultimately is relatively dissatisfying.
Mm.
I feel like they could have done a lot more with this game. This game had a lot of promise.
I feel like it's definitely a step up from Resident Evil 6.
It is a step up from Resident Evil 6, but having said that, a bowl of burned popcorn is a step up from Resident Evil 6. I mean, because at least it's entertaining, and once in a while you bite down on a piece of popcorn and you crack your tooth on a unpopped kernel, and then you're, wow, I get to go to the hospital now, so it's an adventure. Resident Evil 6 is bloody diarrhea from start to finish.
I noticed there weren't any QuickTime events in Resident Evil 7, so that's that.
There is something there. Yeah, there weren't any QuickTime events, and it also wasn't the same boss for 3 different campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
The stupid thing to make donkey noises.
Is that the
I don't know
boss
if you
from
remember that.
Nope.
It was basically a regenerator. You would shoot it, and when its body parts would fall off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that when you would shoot it and its body parts would fall off, they would turn into another one.
Mm.
But yeah, you couldn't kill it. You basically had to like burn it or something. You always had to get it. You had to like lock it in a room and then close the shutters on the room and start a fire in there, and then it would melt. That was the boss for like every single one of the campaigns.
I remember doing that once in Resident Evil 5, but I don't even remember doing that in Resident Evil 6 because I barely remember anything from that game.
Yeah, it was not a threatening boss at all.
Mm.
He wasn't like spiky or anything. He was smooth and he made like weird donkey noises. It was really annoying. So yeah, all in all, I give Resident Evil 7, like, I would have to give it a half.
A half?
Yeah, use whatever rating scale you want. 3.5 or 2.5 out of 5 stars.
Ah, I see.
2.5 out of 5.
So
5 out of 10.
Halfway between good and bad, I guess.
Yeah, it's just right in the middle. It's a bowl of Kraft macaroni and cheese. It ain't really that good, but it'll fill you up.
I think it's the game itself is 4 out of 5 stars. It's a solid experience, but nothing you really have to play before you die.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a 3 out of 5 stars because it's just not my favorite kind of genre. I've got other games I prefer to play instead.
Right. That's understandable.
So it's an okay game, but it's really, yeah, if that's the way the series is going to go, it's too bad. I'd really like to see another Resident Evil 5. And I understand that that's probably the minority because it's not everyone's favorite Resident Evil.
I think widely, obviously Resident Evil 6, but Resident Evil 5 was like not as well received.
Which is weird because it is pretty much just Resident Evil 4 with a different skin and co-op.
Pretty much, yeah.
But I guess that was
Chris's gigantic tree-sized biceps.
Well, that's another part I'm really enjoying because it's so
you like Chris's huge biceps?
Yes, I like how ridiculous he is.
Oh man,
I like
is like real. I love when he first shows up at the beginning of the game and he's wearing that stupid like safari jacket thing, and then with the sleeves rolled up, so his huge hulking biceps are sticking out. And it's just like, dude, you are so far out of your element.
From the beginning of the game where he's wearing that to the end of the game where he punches a boulder into molten lava.
The boulder fight. Boulder paws.
Exactly. It's great. It's enjoyable.
Okay, I will give it that. It was definitely enjoyable. The one, who's the really annoying dude in Resident Evil 5? It's got the really annoying voice. He's like the arms merchant.
I know who you're talking about. I also don't remember his name.
I can't remember any of his lines, but I used to have that one line that he says, like when he first shows up memorized, and that's just really annoying. The one thing, you know what really pissed me off about Resident Evil 5?
Do tell.
The part at the very end of the game when they fire the RPG-7s at Wesker from inside a helicopter, that helicopter would explode.
The blowback.
There's a whole reason that the major part of firing a rocket launcher in the military is looking behind you and saying backblast area clear. Because when you fire one of those, the explosion is going out the back of the rocket launcher. You had 2 people inside a helicopter pointing rocket launchers down, firing them at something. That backblast is going to vent across the top of the ceiling and everyone in there is going to die.
But then again, you are fighting a nigh immortal enemy inside of an active volcano, so realism isn't really the primary concern.
I guess realism really isn't. And then you find like green herbs down there, which makes no sense. How is this green herb growing in the middle of a volcano? What is happening?
Don't question it.
How do green herbs grow everywhere in the Resident Evil universe?
I don't know. It's fun.
They grow in the middle of Raccoon City. They grow in the woods outside of Raccoon City.
Like dandelions.
In the Arklay Mountains.
Yep.
They grow in the Arklay Mountains. Are those even a thing? Did we ever look that up? Are the Arklay Mountains actually a place?
Probably not.
They grow in Louisiana, as evidenced by this game.
Yeah. The little bit of greenery you've seen. By the way, Zach doesn't actually hate people in Louisiana. He just has a very negative experience with Louisiana.
I don't like Louisiana.
It's clouded his experience. He was in the army for a long time.
What you said isn't strictly true. I do hate people from Louisiana.
Okay. You want to clarify that statement, or you just want to leave that as it is?
I dislike rednecks.
Okay.
But
not everyone from Louisiana is a redneck.
Not everyone from Louisiana is a redneck. That's probably because I was in the middle of a Louisiana backwater in nowhere. That's why I don't like Louisiana.
For years.
I lived Resident Evil 7 for about 5 years, actually. Horrible, nasty old ladies would break into my room and rub their crotch all over everything, and beehives would swarm out of it. And some guy chased me around his basement with a chainsaw for like 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah, that got really old really fast. The point of the story is, don't go to Louisiana. If you go to New Orleans, don't. New Orleans is a horrible place. I'm gonna piss off a bunch more viewers here. New Orleans is terrible. Everything smells like trash and vomit. It's awful. I hated it there.
Did you go to Mardi Gras while you were down there?
I did actually.
Really?
It was horrible. That was one of the worst experiences of my entire life. Never go to New Orleans. Oh, it was awful.
That would be interesting in hearing.
Unless you're a raging alcoholic, don't go to New Orleans.
I'd be interested in hearing your Mardi Gras stories later.
And even if you are a raging alcoholic, don't go to New Orleans. You can get liquor cheaper other places. Seriously, it's not worth it. Oh, that whole experience was terrible.
But the Resident Evil 7 experience was adequate.
It's just okay.
It's all right.
It's just an okay game for all the bitching we do about it. Wasn't good. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great.
It was a solid entry in the franchise, but definitely not the most memorable, and it's not something that psychs me up for the next game.
One of the horror games that I know you do like some horror games, because you've played through like all of Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah, but again, those aren't games that are full price. It was like, you pay $5 for them, and you play them for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and you go, that was
true,
entertaining.
I guess. That is true.
Those aren't survival horror, and they're not action horror. They're just it's just
jump
scares.
Jump
scare
horror
simulators.
game. Yeah. I will say, though, that Five Nights at Freddy's does have a very in-depth storyline for games made by a single developer that are cheap and, like, very inexpensive. They actually have a pretty in-depth storyline for that. I am not a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, but I will concede that he has made a highly successful franchise with a very in-depth story. Whether or not you think it's a good game, I don't think that's not a point. It's just that he has done that much.
And again, those aren't games. Nothing. Those aren't games that I would pay full price for. And I didn't. I bought them when they were
like on sale for like $1 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think those games are scary. They scare me when I play them, but that's because they're jump scares. So like something pops out and scares me. And I hate jump scares. I can't stand them because normally I am not unsettled by a lot. It's very easy to jump scare me though. I'm easily startled. I am not easily scared. That's the best way to put it. So like when games can actually scare me, then I am just like the biggest fan of those games, which is why I love the Bloodborne series, why I love Bloodborne. That's why I liked Dead Space. Dead Space was a little bit more unsettling, and I still can't beat the end of the game. Like I won't do it. The eye poke machine, I won't go past that part. I've beaten the game, yeah. I've actually beaten it several times, but the eye poke machine is so unsettling for me that I just I cannot make myself do that.
In the second game, yeah.
And then Alien Isolation. I love that game because that game was so deeply unsettling for me, and just the feeling of being chased for hours and hours and just no respite from that. I loved it. Oh, so good. I like being outside of what my normal mindset would be. And
that reminds me, that's probably one of the sequences that I enjoyed was when Jack was chasing you around with like a shovel or something.
The lawn aerator.
The lawn aerator in the beginning. That was very memorable and also very fun.
That was. I did like that part where you could either basically just sprint from him, which then he would know where you were and he would just run up to you, or you could try to use like sneaking, which you weren't. Ethan is not good at that.
Yeah.
You could basically put your entire inventory of bullets into him and it would have like no effect. You could also get him to fall on the ground. Again, it's something you couldn't kill him. So that part was actually not bad because you can't kill him. You can stop him momentarily, but you can't kill him.
So I pretty much enjoyed everything with Jack, and I thought his son had a lot of great moments.
Yep.
Did not feel so great about the wife. That part was kind of obnoxious.
Boring. Yeah.
But as a whole, it was okay. You know what? You and I can play the DLC, the free DLC that comes out.
We'll have to try it.
Yeah, we'll enjoy that, I think.
We'll definitely have to give it a try. It looks like in the DLC you're maybe going to be playing as Chris or Redfield, if it isn't Chris Redfield. Maybe just Redfield.
Yeah.
It did say Umbrella on the helicopter, so I actually have more fun speculating about Resident Evil, about like all the different groups in Resident Evil 7 than I do with playing Resident Evil 7. Maybe it wasn't actually Chris Redfield. It was just some guy, and like his code name was Redfield because it did say Umbrella Corporation on the helicopter.
I suppose.
And why in the hell would Chris work for the Umbrella Corporation?
Well, maybe they seized the Umbrella Corporation's assets, or maybe
do you think that maybe they were just like, no, Resident Evil 5 and 6 didn't happen.
local story here.
I kind of wonder if maybe they just retconned it, said nope, Resident Evil 5 and 6 didn't happen anymore. Because like that guy was nowhere near as big as Chris was.
Yeah.
And also, if this is true, or if this is like still happening in the same timeline, then the first Resident Evil took place 1998, and let's just assume, for the sake of this, Chris was 20 years old in the first Resident Evil.
He's like 40 now.
That would make him 40 at the end of this game. And Redfield did not look like no 40-year-old. Yeah, that would make, like, if we're just following like a strict timeline, then yeah, that would make Chris almost 40, 49 years old. And that's assuming he was 20 in the first one. I think he was supposed to be like 25 or something.
Yeah, I didn't really think too much about the ending because I was just kind of disappointed by it and I just walked away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't really make a lot of sense. Chris doesn't work for the Umbrella Corporation.
Chris, he worked for that's why I'm wondering if maybe they just retconned it and said Resident Evil 6 and 7 didn't happen because Chris was working for the BSAA, which is the biological something, whatever. So, like, why would he work for Umbrella Corporation in any regard?
I don't know. I didn't look up the lore. There wasn't a whole lot of lore to look up at the end in the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
Based on I don't know. I guess maybe some of those questions will be answered in the DLC or in future content.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Or you can just look them up on Wikipedia. But as for the gameplay, it was okay. It was a nice change of pace, better than Resident Evil 6. Although I still wish they could go back to Resident Evil 5, and I doubt they will.
Can we just stop for a second and talk about how disappointed we were that the demo for Resident Evil 4 was not what Resident Evil 4 was like?
I will not agree with you on that.
Oh!
I'm
so disappointed.
Again, it's a different genre, and I enjoy survival action more than I enjoy survival horror.
I just love that the director for Resident Evil 4, when he showed people the demo, he said, just try not to piss your pants. Should we do like a little close-off thing?
Yeah.